With a Kiss and a Prayer, written by Ellie Dean, read by Julie Maisey. The moral right of the author has been asserted. Chapter 1. Cliffehaven, May 1944. It was Saturday morning, and all was quiet at Beachview, except for sounds of activity in the scullery. Peggy Reilly was attacking the last of the mound of washing that had accumulated over the past week. Her evacuees, or her chicks, as she liked to think of them, had seen to their own and the elderly Cordelia's laundry the day before, but having changed the beds and gone through her father-in-law Ron's tip of a room in search of discarded underwear, dirty towels and shirts, there had been as much as ever to get through, and half the morning was already gone. She filled the stone sink with hot water from the copper boiler, added a spoonful of soda crystals, and, having waited for them to dissolve, began to rinse out the sheets before feeding them through the wringer and into the basket. Each dip of her hands into the hot water and every turn of the wringer's handle reinforced her yearning for a proper twin-tub washing machine. Her older sister Doris had been lucky, and rich, enough to buy one before the war. Peggy knew for a fact that once it was loaded, it made short work of a week's washing, and then all one had to do was transfer it into the second tub, where it was rinsed and spun, ready to be hung out on the line. Yet, as she and Doris had fallen out yet again, there was no chance of using it, even occasionally. Peggy switched off the copper boiler, dumped the last sheet into the basket, hauled it onto her hip, and carried it into the back garden. She thought that by earning her own money at Solly's uniform factory, she could have put down a deposit and paid it off weekly. But it turned out that things like washing machines, electric kettles, fridges and irons were as rare as hen's teeth. And so here she was once more forced to carry on the weekly ritual which ate into her precious weekend off. The two washing lines were strung across the width of the garden from poles attached to the neighbouring fences. Long, forked wooden props stood at intervals underneath the line, keeping the laundry from dragging across Ron's vegetable beds, which had replaced the lawn beyond the paved area beneath the kitchen window. There was a good stiff breeze which snapped and flapped the washing already pegged out, and the sun was bright when it appeared intermittently between the scudding clouds, so at least everything would be dry and ready for ironing before tea time. Peggy's gaze drifted over Ron's sprouting vegetable plot and the ugly corrugated iron Anderson shelter, noting that Queenie the cat had found a sunny spot by the flint wall and was curled in a tight knot fast asleep. The few chickens that had so far escaped the cooking pot were scratching about in their run. The cockerel, which they'd nicknamed Adolf because of the way he strutted about, was sitting on the roof of the coop surveying his harem with a proprietorial glint in his eye. He was a ruddy nuisance with his crowing at all hours, but as the hens laid a good number of eggs and he was often drowned out by the sound of the planes going overhead, Peggy could almost forgive him. She let her mind wander as she wrestled with the sheets, vaguely aware of the familiar background noise of the wireless coming from the many open windows of the neighbouring houses as well as her own. Every shop, pub, factory, office and home kept the wireless on now, but Peggy didn't take much notice of it unless it was time for the news, and then the whole of Cliffehaven stopped what they were doing and gathered round in the hope that the growing rumours of an Allied invasion into France had become reality. It was now almost the end of May, and the number of air raids over France and Germany had increased dramatically. As the news of Allied victories in Italy and the Far East came through, the time seemed right to push their advantage and get rid of Hitler and his thugs once and for all. Yet those in charge appeared to have other ideas, and the waiting was getting to Peggy, just as it was for everyone, for there was still no clue as to when the invasion might happen. But it would. It had to if this war was ever to end. She looked up as several squadrons of bombers and fighter planes roared overhead. They'd recently been taking off and landing at nearby Cliff Aerodrome day and night, the bombing campaign over the northern shores of France and into Germany increasing in strength.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?